Hello. Welcome to the Community Homeworks Workshop this evening. We're so glad that you're joining us tonight. My name is Tiana Harrison, and I'm the Education and Volunteer Coordinator here at Community Homeworks. If you're watching this live, please feel free to comment and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you would like to join in on the discussion or ask questions, please put that in the comment section as well. If you're watching this, happy to answer your questions. It just may take us a little longer to respond. Community Homeworks is a nonprofit organization with a mission to empower homeowners to maintain safe, sustainable, and dignified homes. We get our fundings from grants, gifts, and donations. So if you find value in this workshop tonight, we encourage you to donate on our website at communityhomeworks.org. This Green Living Series workshop was made possible by the generous donation of the Kalamazoo Community Foundation's Love Where You Live Environment Fund. Tonight, maintenance, and our instructor tonight is the magnificent Mr. Lee Taylor. Thank you so much for being here. We're looking forward to learning more about water heater maintenance.
Okay. You're on, Lee.
All right. So this is basic, as far as maintenance on water heaters, and we'll be talking about different water heaters that are out there in the world. If you have a question, I don't know if Tiana said that already, but I'll say it again. Type it in so that we can hopefully be able to answer it. And please forgive us. This is our second time we've had people in person and trying to do the camera, so it gets a little bit goofy. So, all right. Well, we're just going to start in with your basic water heaters. There are basically three styles of water heaters, if you want to think of it that way. If you're thinking it as far as there's two styles as far as like a tanked water heater. Those come in all various sizes and whatnot. And then you have what are called tankless or on-demand water heaters. You good? Oh, yeah. So, there's what are called on-demand or tankless water heaters. When I say three, what I'm getting at is you have two versions of the tank. You have the older style version that this is the exhaust, and it usually goes into a chimney or something along that line. And then you have a newer style like this. It's called a power vent, and it runs usually out of rim joist or something along that line. So in my eyes, I see it as three, but technically really there's two. So I'm going to go over just the basic parts of these real quick, and then we'll get into just some of your basic maintenance on them. So we'll start, with the tank itself. Like I said, they range all over the place. Most of them are about 40. They hold about 40 gallons of water. You can get some that are much, much bigger. So the size is usually written down on here as far as how many gallons it holds. Like I said, most residential ones are about 40 gallons. So we'll start from the top. You got your water in, hot water out. This particular style, the older style, this is your exhaust. And as the burner runs, it's going to be sending up all your flue gases and everything right up through here and then out your chimney. You have your actual tank. You have a couple things on the tank that I want to point out. You have what this is right here. This is called a pressure relief valve. So if for some reason too much pressure builds up inside that tank, this valve will actually blow. It'll open like this. And there's usually a pipe connected this a couple inches off the ground, and it spews all the water out. Before they had those, they had issues of these things blowing up in the basement and shooting through the floor and then through the roof. So not good, but that's a pressure relief valve. You get your gas valve. Like I said, most of them around here, natural gas. There are electric ones, and I'll show you some things with that. But these both are gas style. Pretty sure that one might be an electric. I have to look at it. Oh, it is gas. Got your gas valves here. Your burners and everything are underneath here. And then this is what they call a sealed unit. Most of the newer ones are sealed versus the old style that had just a little metal plate that you could take off and then you'd see the burner. And I'll show you the burner in a minute. So, but most of them are sealed now. And then you have your vents. Some of them have venting on the side. That's what these holes are for here, for combustion and whatnot. So, and then you have your drain valve right here. So, as far as I'll pick on this guy for a while here. As far as the general maintenance on these water heaters, a lot of times what will happen is you'll hear, the water heaters, when the burner kicks on and stuff, you'll hear it popping and making all sorts of weird noises. And actually, if you guys want to come over, I'll show you. What you're hearing is a flashlight that's flashing. Did you want to see the inside of this thing? So what you're hearing is that's the tank. That's the flue right there. And that's your hot water out, and that's your hot or cold water in. What happens is you get buildup, line buildup, scale, and all that sort of stuff on the sides. And it flakes off and whatnot, and falls down in. Ends up down there on the bottom. That's important why I say that, because what happens is if you were to look straight down there, I'll let you peek in there with that camera real quick, hon. So if you look down there, there's the bottom of the tank right there, and you can see that it's building up some of the stuff and some of the crud. I'll let you hold this. You peek in there. So what happens is that all that crud starts to build up on the bottom of that tank, and what it does is that burner is underneath all that, and what you want to do is flush that tank out to get that stuff out of there. So you usually once a year you want to try to flush that out. And with these tank models like this, what you have on this side is this valve, this drain valve right here. And yeah, it's sitting right here. And a lot of them have, a slot for a screwdriver or whatever. But what you're going to do is when it comes time to, once a year, as I said, you want to get this done. You want to shut the water heater off. So in this case, on your gas valve here, you can turn it to low and off. There's the off position there. So I can turn it to off right there. That way the flame's not going to go on. I personally like to turn that gas valve so it's off also. And then most of the time, and this one doesn't have it. This one does. You're going to have your some kind of a turn off up on top. In line for this kind of ball valve means that it's open. And when you turn it, when you turn it, it's really grouchy. There it goes. So when you turn it like that, it shuts it off. So the water coming in. Usually there's not one on the hot side. And then what you're going to want to do, if you have a floor drain, great. If you don't, you can get a bucket or something along that line. Hook this up. Obviously, I can't do it, but I can go through the steps. You just hook up a, garden hose fitting or something along that line. That's why I say if you have an old garden hose, keep a chunk of it, because you can run it. If your floor drains way over there, you can run it all the way over there. Stick your screwdriver in. Some have a handle, and open it up. And what we'll do is it'll start flushing out all that guck out of the bottom. Remember how we saw the inside? It was a pan shape. So you can get things that are just built up on the tank itself from hard water and all that sort of stuff. You can also get other weird debris in there. So, quick story. Person I knew called me up and said her water heater wasn't heating the water up much. I said, well, when's the last time you flushed it? He goes, a couple of years ago or whatever. I said, well, we can go flush it and stuff. So I came over and we were working on it. and opened it up, and nothing was coming out. So I had to like take this off and like stick a screwdriver in there or something to try to get it loosened up, or a little wire or something like that in there. What it ended up was the whole bottom of the tank, probably up to about here, was filled with sand. And I said, well, that's weird. I said, was there, a water main break or something like that? She goes, oh, yeah, there, last year, whatever, there was a water main break. And that sand got sucked in and it just dumped into the tank. So now it was trying to go through just the normal debris, but then it also had a bunch of sand in the bottom. I think we pulled out like 2 5-gallon buckets of sand out of that thing. And so it's that burner. You said if that burner has to work to try to heat up that 40 gallons of water through a layer of crud, it's just not going to be able to do it. So by flushing it out, like I said, you can run it to wherever you need to, or a 5-gallon bucket. When I'm doing it, I'll let it run for a while. And again, you're dropping it down. This is why you want to make sure it's turned off. So you're not going to be draining the whole thing. Usually what I'll do is I'll let it run for 5-10 minutes or so. And then what I'll do is I'll go back to the cold, and I'll turn that on a couple of times. And what that does is help stir up any of that residue on the bottom and then let it run out. So you can do that a couple of times to be able to make it so that it kind of kicks up that residue to be able to get that out. So if you do that a couple times and it starts to run clear, great. Shut it off. Disconnect your hose. That's about it. But what I would suggest doing when you're working on that is if you have this style where it's venting into a chimney or something along that line, is make sure that you're drafting. And what I mean by that is if you look on the top of the water heater, you might see like black streaks that are feathered. They look like little fingers, and they're coming out from this area right in here. It's usually an indication that those gases that are being created by that natural gas or propane or whatever are not being vented out properly. So what they do is they spill out, and they kind of spill out this way. So that's usually an indication, if you have that sort of a bad draft, it's just dumping carbon monoxide back into your house. The other is that you can see how these 3 or 4 tabs are into the top of the water heater itself. You got little tabs in here. You want to make sure that for some reason it hasn't been knocked, say like that, because that right there would, sure enough, poison you. This happened to us in an old trailer where the water heater actually kicked down a little bit, rotted through the floor, and it did this sort of thing. It was just dumping carbon monoxide into the house. So that's one of those checks you want to do. You can also, what you can do is make sure your water heater is running. So you can make sure you can kick everything back on, turn the gas on, turn the pilot and all that sort of stuff on, and make sure that burner's running. And then you can just get like an incense stick or something along that line, and you want to hold it right about here, and it should draft right up as that's running. If for some reason you put that incense stick, or even if you don't have that, a piece of paper and blow it out so it's smoking, if it's spewing that out, something's clogged in here. It could be a variety of things with these older styles. I've seen it where birds have been, falling down the chimney or whatever and block this. I've seen all sorts of things blocking this. Sometimes the pipe itself can get corroded. So if you have this style, and this is furnaces too, you want to, if you have this style furnace, you're checking the draft, good. You're checking that it's secured down to the top of the water heater, and that's good. What you also want to do is do a rough check on the pipe itself. Don't touch it. It's really hot. But you can do a visual inspection on it. And it's one of those things where you'll know when it's bad. The reason is that there's you get quite a bit of condensation moisture in that exhaust, and it can start to rust these out, especially if you have a longer run where, let's say, your chimney's, I don't know, 3 or 4 feet away, right? And it has to run up at an angle and then connect in. Sometimes what will happen is that may have gotten hit or something like this, and what it does is it settles a little bit, and you get an area in there where water or condensation collects. So then it starts to rust that area out. So a simple, quick inspection of the pipe, if there are no holes or dents or it's been hit or whatever. If it has been, you want to get somebody out that is qualified to be able to work on those water heaters and the venting and all that sort of thing. So that's usually when I flush that out. I'm going to do a quick check on that. And I'm talking, this is the old system here. Newer systems like this is what's called power vent system. Pretty much everything's the same. We'll get into the gas valves in a minute. This one, the exhaust gas is not quite as hot, so that's why they can use PVC pipe. So, and you would do, when you flush this out, a lot of the same things kind of apply, except for this part, because this is all sealed in, where that is all, it runs through, and then this power vent here moves that combustion gas out of the house. But you still would want to do a quick visual inspection on the pipe. And I mean, it's most of the time it's where maybe they didn't glue a joint or something like that, and it might be going along and tooling around to the outside or something, and you may see a spot where there's water dripping from a joint. That's not good. So that's usually an indication that it got whacked or it got hit or something, or it just got partially glued. So quick inspection on that will generally do pretty good. And you can also make sure it's running and go outside, and you'll be able to feel it, exhausting out. Will tell you that there's nothing clogging it. But I still do a visual inspection on it to make sure it hasn't been hit or that there's any joints that are loose. The other with the motor and all this sort of stuff, I can't start this guy up, but it's similar to when we were talking about furnaces, where it has a certain step. It goes through a certain series of steps. You'll hear this motor kick on, just like that little motor in the furnace. It will run for a minute, and then it will tell it'll tell the gas valve, yep, go ahead and kick on, because there's nothing blocking the exhaust. On that same note, similar to the furnace, let's say you have something that's blocking it on the outside, or there's something blocking it in the pipe itself. This motor will run and run and run and never get it down to that negative pressure that it wants it to be, and it won't kick on. So that's one of those little things with these power vents where it's nice, because that's that safety feature that's built into it. So if you have an issue where this runs and your gas valve never kicks on, it could be something as simple as it's blocked outside, snow drift or something leaning against it or whatever. So it's some of those. There's similarities there with it. You have piping and all this sort of stuff similar to what we were talking about in the furnace itself. So it said a lot of this is similar enough to where if you understand that, you can kind of relate these to the exhaust motor on the furnace. So I do want to point out this thing here. So we had talked about wrapping the pipes, right? As far as with weatherization and making it so that you're not losing a ton of heat out of your water lines. The issue with this one is what I say about this guy. Right. So something like that could be a bad thing. That one, no, not an issue. One like this, yeah. Right. It's going to get hot, potentially melt this. So anyways, as far as the gas valves go.
Lee, before you get there,
are
there Are there benefits of one of these water heaters over another? Is one a better one?
Yeah, the power vent one is the more efficient of these two. Yes, and generally it's going to have better insulation and stuff like this. I talked about this in weatherization class and stuff. As far as an easy trick to know if your water heater is really that well insulated, because like I said, when they build them, it's all an insulated jacket around that inner tank. My thing is, you can put your hand on it. It may feel warm, but not too bad. That's usually a pretty well insulated tank. These older ones, half time you put your hand on the top, you can't leave it there for long, because you're just losing all that heat right out of the top, because they just don't have that much insulation. Yep. The blanket. Yep. So let me repeat that question, because I'm really bad at that. So she asked if you have the older style, if you want to use the insulated blanket around it. It doesn't hurt. Generally, that insulated blanket does not go on top. It's just going to wrap around the body of it. The other issue with that is, and this is part of what we were talking about with this sealed unit where the flame is down here, is if it's a really old unit and you just have those little metal doors that you can pop off, that becomes more of an issue. You have to be very careful. If you don't have a sealed unit like this, you have to be careful as far as not getting that insulation anywhere near where that open flame is. And I'll show you that flame in a sec. If you have a sealed unit where it's, you have screws that are holding this thing down and it's gasketed on, I wouldn't cover it. But here's the other issue with all of that. Remember how we were saying that you have these gaps on the side for combustion air and all that sort of stuff? Same with that one. And if you read these, it'll say don't block these. So if you're putting a wrap around it, you want to make sure that you're not blocking any venting that is on the side either. So yes, it helps, but you have to be very conscious of what you're doing. So, and on that note too, I've seen it where people have, tanked water heaters like this, and they're off in a corner and there's stuff boxes piled up all around them and everything else, and they're having issues with their combustion. That's because the airflow is not able to get to it. So you want to keep that area clear around it, a couple feet around it at least. So now, as far as the gas valves go, all different styles out there. Some of the older versions, they're called thermocouples. And this is similar we were talking about in heating class, where this senses the flame. And it's two pieces of metal in here. What it does is it runs back to your gas valve. This one doesn't have one. We don't have one that old, but there are ones that are still chugging away. And it senses that flame and makes it so the gas valve can open up. And again, just like that flame sensor we were talking about on the furnace, this can get sooted up. So if you have an old style like this, you'll see this, you'll see a copper line or something along that line like this coming out. And this one actually has one right there and going in. So the issue with this is that if you have one of these, what I would do is figure out what kind you need, because usually this is the one thing that usually goes out on those furnaces. It gets all sooted up. It doesn't sense the flame. That flame kicks on and then runs for a second and kicks back off again because it's not being sensed by that thermocouple. So sometimes an easy fix with these is a toothbrush or something like that. Get in there, scrub it off. Some people use a real fine sandpaper or something and clean off that soot. And it will make it so it actually is able to sense that flame. So thermocouple is one. Interesting thing about the thermocouples is you definitely want to have your model and your serial number on that, because you have threads that go in, usually to the underside of the gas valve, and sometimes they're what's called a reverse thread. It's not the good old righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. It's opposite of all that. So why they did that, I'm not sure, but they did. So sometimes you get relatively specific thermocouples. With those also, you have what's called a standing pilot. And that's what that, a lot of times, I'm sorry, I back up, I misspoke. The old style is the standing pilot hit this. So what it would do is it would sense that the pilot was on, not the flame. And, but, a lot of times you'd have that standing pilot. So you'd have the knob on the top that you turn and have to depress and hold down for a minute and stick a long match in there and light it and stuff. So you have that standing pilot. Like I said, most of them don't have that. Yours might, being that old. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of the gas valve stuff is relatively straightforward. And I said a lot of the new ones, yeah, this is a pilot. This is a piloted one. So I have a pilot right there, and I can press that in to be able to, but it has a spark ignition instead of having to stick a thing in there because of that sealed unit. And then you can set it to whatever kind of setting you want. This is the old rotary style. This guy right here, this style gas valve is just very similar. You're either warming up or cooler, a little light indicator. Usually where the arrow is kind of the recommended temperature setting. If you have little kids in the house, that sort of thing, you can max it up to whatever you want. The issue with these bigger tanks is that whatever you set it at, let's say you want really hot water, fine. But you're keeping that 40 gallons at whatever temperature it is that you set. So, and then you still have your recovery time. So, I mean, whether you're using it or not, you're using all the gas to be able to keep all that water at that certain temperature versus something like a tankless water heater where it's on demand. When you're calling for hot water, it heats it up right at that point. We'll get into that when we get over there. So, yeah, like I said, that's the general maintenance on these style tank styles. There is some more stuff, but we're going to run out of time if I keep going on this. Did you guys have any questions on these at all? I don't trust that. Oh, shit. Oh, sorry. Thank you. She had said it said self-cleaning water heater. Well, the thing is, you notice there's still a drain. Oh, yeah. So sometimes now, okay, I'm going to back up. Sometimes I think it is how the water goes in. I've heard of ones that when it goes in, it swirls around a little bit so that it suspends that material and spits it out instead of letting it necessarily settle on the bottom. But I don't know if that's particularly this style. Even if it is this, I would still flush it once in a while, because if this one had the drain on it, it just was pulled out. If you hooked up a hose to that thing, drained it out, and you're getting cruddy water out of there, that's all the stuff that, again, and it doesn't take into account if you have those issues like that sand issue that we were talking about before, where once it gets in there, I don't know if it's going to be suspended enough to be able to get out. So, sort of related, is if you notice, your most kitchen sinks, bathroom faucets, that sort of thing, have aerators on them. And if you, let's say they're doing work on the road or whatever, and they're having to break into the water lines and stuff, you can introduce a lot of crud from the outside. And let's say you kick on your faucet, and that water is just not coming out that much. You pull off your aerator, and it's full of whatever, right? You clean that out, put it back on, now your faucet runs fine. That should be a little indicator that all that stuff got caught by your aerator. It's a good chance all that stuff is in your water heater also. So if you have that issue where all of a sudden that pops up, you may want to jump in, flush your water heater out real quick too. So no, I wouldn't. And if there's a company, oh yeah, thank you. I'm not good at this. She asked if there's chemicals that you can put into the tank to help it kind of descale it and stuff. Me personally, I'd be a little nervous about that because you're talking about potable water that you can drink. So, you know, if there is, that would be a question of more of a plumber or something along that line. There might be something out there on the market. But again, you know, you're generally talking they'd have to break into the water line and be able to dump it in and everything else. So I do want to point out one other thing. I'll show you over here. I'm gonna have you guys get up again. So some water heaters have this right on top. I don't know if you can see that or not. It's basically what it is a rod. This is what's called an anode rod. That's where I was wishing this one had it, because then you'd be able to see it. But you can get the water inside can get corrosive, and instead of attacking the tank, it goes after this rod, and it makes it so that the rod actually disintegrates over time versus your tank. So, and it's called an anode rod. So sometimes if you get like weird smells or whatever coming out of your water heater and you have one of those, sometimes it means that a plumber has to come out and be able to unscrew that, pull that anode rod in, and put a new one in. It's just a sacrificial thing that helps prolong the life. So, like I said, some of them have an anode rod, some do not. But if you're wondering what that is, that's what that is. So, we were talking about these pressure relief valves before. And like I said, there's usually, well, by code, there should be a pipe that's a couple inches off the ground, right? And it's connected here. What can happen a lot of times is that this right here, if I were to pull this open, it would open that valve up and dump water out. Okay, so on the inside, it's, you got a circle and you got oversimplified. But, you know, when you pull it, it opens up and does this sort of thing, right? Sometimes this can get cocked a little bit and you get a little drip, drip, drip out of this. So let's say you see water dripping out of that. Usually what I'm going to do is, I'm not going to open it, but I'm just going to flick it a couple of times just to, you know, let it reset. And sometimes that's all it takes to be able to make so it stops dripping. But sometimes these fail out. That's what these look like right here. So you have this is the part that melts down and blows all the water out. And you can see on the inside that spring, right? And that's that valve where it holds it. See that where it's opening right there? See that? You can see. Yep. So sometimes that where it seeps just gets a little cocked. If for some reason it just keeps on dripping and keeps on dripping, you can go out and buy one of these. And what you do is you can get a pair of channel locks or whatever, and you shut the water heater down, hook up your hose and drain it out. So you want to get that water down to somewhere in here. Get a decent pair of channel locks on. And sometimes putting something around it to give you more leverage. Twist this thing off because it's just threaded on. You can see there's just some threads on there. And unthread it, take it in, get a new one, put some pipe dope or some, I like pipe dope best, or Teflon tape or something on it. Twist it back on, orientate it so it's pointing down, reattach your pipe, and that's it. So, you know, something like that is relatively easy to do, but you have to let it cool down. So again, hot water, you don't want that spewing all over the place. But replacing these is not that big a deal. Now, if it does blow for some reason, that's when you definitely want to call a plumber out. I'm talking about an annoying leak, not a my tanks got way over pressured and blew this. If that happens, yeah, you need to get somebody out there because something's going wrong with the tank for some reason. So, all right, can show you what. So we were talking about the burner underneath, and like I said, these new sealed units. That burner is a little bit hard to see. There's a little sight window that you can look in there and see. I'll show you what these. I mean, those actually burn really hot. So, I mean, you can see that thing is going pretty good. And it's using a decent amount of gas when it's doing that. But that's what that burner looks like. And it just sits right underneath. And then you have your flame sensors and whatever in here, igniters and all that sort of stuff. So, if you look at this one here, come on closer. I know. No, I shut the gas off and everything. So tell me, what are we looking at here from last week's class? What would you guess these are? They might be hot. You're right. Yeah, one's a flame igniter, like a glow stick, and then this one's probably the flame sensor. So similar to what we were talking about last week. If you have a system like this, and that flame kicks on like that, and just boom, kicks out. Well, in this case, you have to take this off and disconnect your gas and stuff like that. Pull it out, and then you little screw like that, unhook it, take it out. There's that little screw right there, and you can, you said, have your model number, serial number. Go down, get that new part, and put that in. Usually, this is plugged into the underside of the gas valve. So, like I said, sometimes these little fixes are relatively easy, usually than you'd think. Usually, the hardest part in all this is getting the sealer this off, because they'll put like either a rubber gasket, or sometimes they'll put like a caulk around it or something like that. So you take the screws out and you're like, because it's really sealed on there good. So no, most of the time, yeah, right, that rubber seal is there. He said you want it, most of the time that rubber seal is going to be good enough with that. If for some reason that rubber seal is damaged, you probably would be able to get a new one when you picked up that part. So that's one of those things. If you pull that cover off, yeah, take a peek at that and see. So, but yeah, that's what the standard burner looks like for that. I know you guys don't have electric water heaters, but these are the heaters for electric water heaters. And a lot of times these are going to be somewhere on the side. You'll see usually a cover like this, one high, one low, and you open that up and you have this where it slips in for the electric water heaters. Those are a bit different. Would I suggest getting into them? Maybe not. But with electric water heaters too, because you don't have the gas valve, you have those. That's what we should have, is a picture of an electric water heater with the stuff. Again, you have those covers, usually a couple screws holding it on. You pull them off, disconnect your power, please. And then you'll have a little dial in there that you stick a small screwdriver in and turn that up or down, versus either a press button or that style where you're adjusting how much that flame's going. So there are more and more electric water heaters out there. So they still have some of the same issues as far as, having to flush them and all that sort of stuff. But that part is a little different. So they can go out. Just I don't think they need to be clean necessarily. I haven't personally, I've not dealt with enough electrics to deal with that one. So if you had an electric water heater, I would talk to the plumber and find out if if there's certain maintenance that you need to do on those. I think they try to make them. I think generally they try to make them so people aren't having to dig into them too much. So
Those elements will corrode.
yeah,
They're somewhat sacrificial, kind of like that sacrificial rod in the other ones.
right.
And so they will corrode, and you can. I mean, the elements that we have there are replacement elements in case somebody's corrodes away.
Yeah.
Stops working.
Yep. I do want to point out on this real quick. This is one of these goofy things with these power vent water heaters. See this little toggle switch on the front? Your on-off switch. So let's say you have this style water heater and it's not kicking on or whatever. Check that first. As goofy as it is, you talk about like with the thermostat, it really sucks when the plumber comes out and goes, "It's working now." Oh, if you're lucky. I think they're charging $160 an hour now or something. I know, it's scary. So little things like that. So any questions on these tanked water heaters? You ready to see a tankless? We good for a field trip? All right. Cool, let's go. We're going up this way. Up the ramp. Oh, you have us all going near, near, near. You can see this is where all the magic happens. Oh, sorry. Storage room. Prop room. What the heck is that? Vicious looking thing. Ooh. Anyways. Distracted. Watch your step. Yeah, I did. You know me. So this is what they call a tankless water heater. In a sense, and I'll make this real simple. Got your hot, you're cold and you're hot. Water comes in when you turn on your faucet for hot water. Cold water comes in, runs through a coil, and you know with the natural gas, it uses quite a bit of natural gas to heat that water up as it's running through that coil, and then pops out at a certain temperature. And it'll just keep doing that until that is satisfied. Somebody turns off the faucet. So, it uses a lot of gas when it's on, but for the most part, it's just sitting here. So, right, it only runs when somebody's calling for water. So you're not keeping that 40 plus gallons of water at a certain temperature. The inside of this is convoluted. It's one of those things that most often you open these up and it looks like the inside of a submarine, and you're like, ugh. But usually don't have to worry about those. But with most of them, they do need to be flushed. It depends. They say at least once a year. If you have real hard water and you don't have soft water, you might want to do it every 6 months. So like with mine, I do it every 6 months, but it's super easy. So what you have here is this is what's called a clean out kit. So if you have a tankless installed, ask them if they include what's called a clean out on it. And that's these right here. If you don't have that, it makes it a real pain to flush it out. But this makes it so that you can flush it out relatively easy. So what you do is, so you have your water coming in like this. That's what this valve does. And you shut this valve. If this were shut off, it would stop that water from going up this way. Then you have this valve would just shut off. That makes it so that you can hook something up here. The water goes in, And then you have this valve and this valve. So how do you do it? Well, relatively easy. You get just a little submersible pump, and you can buy these at most of the stores. And what you're going to do is that aside. So first thing you're going to do is shut this thing down. So I shut that down. I'm going to look for my gas line. Don't do that. Look for my gas line. I'm going to shut that off also. And now what I'm doing is you have these little caps. Yeah, sure, you can unscrew them. Come on. Do it so the water is not going in. So you have this one here. Turn that off so that stops that cold water right. And then you have hot water that's going out this way. So you turn this one. So that stops that. Now, oh yeah, sip of white vinegar. Usually 3 gallons is about right. You just want to make sure you're not running that dry. If one of you guys want to do me a favor and hook up, I don't care which line, to this right here. If you want to just hook that up while I dump these in, that would be excellent. And what I do too is if, I said I have one of these at home, I just leave these lines connected up here and they just sit down. I have the bucket sitting down there. So I don't have to necessarily hook it up each time. I just disconnect a few things and then they just sit there and kind of. Vinegar is acidic and it's going to clean the inside of that coil. So what happens is as that water is going through that line, that burner, heat exchanger, whatever you want to call it, it leaves that scale buildup on the inside. So it builds up. And it's similar to the bottom of the tank that we were talking about. Those flames hitting that heat exchanger have to get through all that buildup. So by cleaning that buildup off, it makes it so it's more efficient. So I'm going to put 2 in there. It depends on the size. So 2.5 for now. We got a plug. Oh, we do right there. Excellent. We'll set this off to the side for now. All right. We got this. Plunk it in there. What you doing? I'll let one of you guys go ahead. Doesn't matter who. Hook one up there. You can hit blue to blue or red to red. Doesn't really matter. Oh, that does matter. That one. I lied. Because you want it running through. It's going to run through this way. You want it running through the way the water would run through. Yeah, it's been a minute. Part of the reason I leave them hooked up. And this one goes right there. You want to make sure the washers are in there. I did this a couple years back. Hooked it all up, forgot about the washers. Turned it on, it sprayed everybody in the class. I was like, oops, no washers. So, sometimes a pair of channel locks or whatever, just to kind of snug it down a little bit. But we'll see if it sprays. This is an important part. Again, learn the hard way. When you put this in, because what it's going to do is going to suck up the vinegar. Go in once we turn this valve in through and then back out and recycle this. Hook this in here somehow. So what I'll do is a lot of times it has this little handle or something like this. I hook that in so it's not going to spit out. Because when you're running this, most of the time you want this to run for an hour or so, So a lot of times people will set it up, kind of watch it for a second to make sure nothing's leaking, nothing's spraying all over. and they walk away for however long. Some people do this and go to lunch or whatever, go shopping, and just let that thing run. So now we're just going to suck that vinegar out. It's going to come in here, but this is shut off, so we're going to turn this. You may get a little water that's left in that tank, and it might ooze back out, and that's fine. Then we're going to open this one up here. So now that's open. I double check to make sure the power's off, the gas is off, that sort of thing. You don't want this thing kicking on while it's running. You don't want to heat up vinegar. I'm going to unplug this. So you see, that's just running like that. That's where I was talking about. You want that to be secured. So, and I just kind of look at it real quick to make sure it's not sucking that dry. If it is, add a little more vinegar to it. They said usually a couple gallons is just about right. That's it. Let it run for an hour or so, and then all it is what you would do is when you're done, I unplug it, and then everything in reverse. Turn this off, this one off. Then I'm going to turn these on. Again, water in, hot water out. Turn the gas back on. Turn your power back on. Then what I'm going to do is go turn on a faucet or something like that, because you're going to have a certain amount of vinegar left in there. It's not going to kill you if you drink a little vinegar, but you don't want to necessarily, and flush it out. But sometimes when you're doing this, you'll come back, that water will be milky white, and that's telling you it's pulling a lot of that stuff out of there. And I said that's about it. And I said what I do, a little detail that I do, is that I leave these hooked up, and I just have my bucket sitting underneath, and I'll turn off the valves and rearrange them how they need to be. What I'll do, though, is I'll dump that vinegar out, and sometimes before I even hook this up, I will put fresh water in there to clean out the pump itself. Because, again, it can be a little corrosive of that vinegar and stuff. That's just me, but, sometimes people just kind of dunk it in there a little bit. And then, like I said, just make it so it dries up, that sort of stuff, and you're good. Sometimes, depending on your model, there can be other things that you need to do. So sometimes, and this one doesn't have one that I'm seeing, but mine at home, oh, wait, maybe it does. See this right here? I do have the manual. It's right here. But, so this is where you'd want, if you have a tankless, you'd want to read that. Most likely what this is a little screen that filters. It's like an aerator in your faucet. So a lot of times when you're doing this, before you turn this on, you have a bucket underneath there, because when you take this out, you're going to get water that drips out, right? And you clean that screen off. That's usually there. I didn't do it on this one, but the other is a lot of them now have your combustion air and your exhaust air, just like a furnace. You have two pipes going out. On the inside, where your intake area is, a lot of times there's a little screen up there. So if I was to pull this off, this one doesn't have it. At least I don't think. Where, at home, I'd pull mine off. There's a little screw up in this corner where my exhaust or where my intake is for fresh air. And there's that little screen there, and bugs and whatever else gets stuck in there. Use a simple screw, pull it out, put it back in, done. So like I said, it depends on the water heater, but this is where, keep your manual around so you can go through and make sure that all the steps that need to be done for that particular model are done. I will say this about the water heaters, or these tankless. They're great. There are a few things that you have to understand about them. You want to, whoever installs them has to have a good understanding of how tankless work. And the reason is most often what happens is people will go to a store or something like that, and they'll see one, and it's like, well, it's only $200 or it's only $400, right? Maybe. What they go by is how many gallons per minute can run through this. So what they do is they say, all right, we're going to go through your house and we're going to add up. You have a tub and you have, 2 bathroom sinks and you have laundry and you have, however many hot fixtures there are in the home. And what they do is they say, all right, this one uses 1 gallon per minute. This uses 2. This uses 3. And they add those up because they want to size it to the point where if for some reason you have a bunch of hot water or, turned on at various points, it has enough capacity to be able to heat that water up. That's step 1. Step 2 is the gas line. Remember, I said it uses quite a bit of gas when it's running. So a lot of times they want 1 inch or 3/4 inch or something like that. So versus, like a unit like those, it can take a 1/2 inch line. So sometimes you have to call out an HVAC person that can run gas line and get that closer to wherever you're going to be mounting this. So that's one of those costs that you have to think about when you're installing them. And then the other is just kind of how they act. So it can only heat it up a certain amount, right? So you have to kind of keep in mind, like, how cold is that water coming in? And I'll just use this as a rough calculation. It's not right, but I'm just using it as a demonstration. Let's say the water coming in is 40 degrees. It's middle of February. It's really cold. That groundwater is really cold, right? So let's say the water coming in is 40 degrees. Let's say this has the capacity of, say, 50-degree rise. And this is not right. But it can heat up that water 50 degrees. Is that water going to be colder in the middle of the winter versus in the summer when that groundwater is coming in? It's a little bit warmer. So there's that little bit. But again, we've had one for years. You don't really notice that necessarily. The other is that as that water is going through, let's say you have multiple faucets running, it's going to slow that water down. It's going to restrict it down a little bit to be able to help heat it up, make it run through there just a little bit slower. So you may not get the pressure, if you have multiples going, you may not get the pressure that you want necessarily just because it's restricted it down a little bit so it can heat it up. So as I said, there's a few little quirks about it, but for the most part, you get adjusted to them pretty quick. And then, like I said, the maintenance on it is pretty much this. What I'll do is I write down, set it up my phone, or I write it down right on with a Sharpie. Last time I did it, and I also have it set up on my phone to go off and say, hey, time to flush the water heater. So, but like I said, these are really nice. And I said a lot of people are going to them. I don't know if these are available in electric. I really don't. I've never seen one, but there might be. So, but a lot of the same things, and you have the pressure relief valve and all this sort of stuff. I'm not going to open this up because it is scary looking inside. But the other thing is that if you have, if you do have service on it, you want to make sure that whoever's coming out is qualified to work on them. And I think more and more plumbers are getting that way. I know a lot of plumbers hated them because they had so many customer complaints because they didn't quite understand some of those details. So you want to make sure it's sized right for your family size or how much hot water can be potentially used in the home. And then just those other understandings as far as how much can actually heat that water up and you get a bit of pressure loss. I think we're at 6 o'clock, right? Is that what you're saying? All right. You have any questions on this? It's just like so if you talk about parts and pieces, yeah, this has a lot more parts and pieces, right? So there is that. How often do they go out? I don't have a good saying on that. We've had ours for 6 years or so. Never had an issue with it. But well, no. Inside of this is not. No, not really. I mean, outside of those maintenance things like the screen or that sort of stuff. Oh, sorry, maintenance. She said, is it easier maintenance on the tanked water versus the tankless? I would say probably easier on the tanked water heater. But you have to think, how much money are you saving by not keeping that 40 plus gallons of water at whatever temperature you want? So it's one of those things where, yeah, there are more parts and pieces and moving parts in this. They go out, and that's get a viable brand that has been around for a minute. I can deal with that. But Evian or whatever, pretty good. They even have tankless. And I've seen them where they hook them up to a heating system or whatever, but they're a much larger unit, but they have them out there. So there's a lot of things you can do with these. They're pretty cool. But yeah, flushing that out, like I said, that's the main thing that you would do every 6 months or every year at least. So that's it. Want me to actually shut this thing up, let it run for a little while? Yeah, might as well. So yeah, I did all that. All right. I think we're out of time. So our short field trip. We do take in the summer. We'll take field trips where we walk around the outside. He shut us off.
Yep.
All right. Thank you very much, Lee. Great workshop tonight. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. If you have questions after the workshop, feel free to write those in the comment section, or you can also write them to us on email. And I'm trying to get that there. Okay, it's running across the bottom of the screen, education@communityhomeworks.org. And we can reply to those messages there. Thank you very much for joining us again. This was a Green Living Series workshop, and it was made possible by the Kalamazoo Community Foundation's Love Where You Live Environment Fund. So thank you very much for your support. Have a great evening, everyone.